Imagine standing alone on a weathered dock, watching as your entire way of life is threatened by corporate greed, until an unexpected alliance changes everything. In the quiet fishing town of Port Harbor, Maria Sanchez ran the same bait and tackle shop her grandfather opened 50 years ago. With its worn wooden floors and walls lined with fishing memorabilia, her shop was more than just a business. It was the heart of the community. But when luxury resort developers set their sights on the harbor, Maria found herself facing a battle she never expected to fight. Let me take you through what happened in this small coastal town. How one shop owner's stand against powerful developers sparked an unprecedented response, and why the night the Coast Guard vessels lined up in the harbor changed everything for this community forever. The story of Port Harbor is one that's playing out in coastal towns across America, but what happened here was different. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how corporate development tactics work, why small businesses are particularly vulnerable, and most importantly, the surprising legal precedent this case established that's now protecting coastal communities nationwide. Port Harbor sits on a crescent-shaped bay on the Pacific coast. For generations, the town thrived on fishing and tourism, with locally owned businesses lining the waterfront. The town's charm came from its authenticity: weathered docks, fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, and family businesses that had operated for decades. Maria's shop, Sanchez Bait and Tackle, occupied the corner building at the harbor entrance. Her grandfather, a commercial fisherman from Mexico, opened it in 1973 after saving for 20 years. The shop wasn't just where locals bought fishing gear, it was where fishing tournaments were organized, where kids learned to tie their first knots, and where the community gathered during storms. "I grew up in this shop," Maria often told customers. "My grandfather taught me everything about fishing from behind this very counter." At 62, Maria had declined countless offers to sell over the years. The shop wasn't just her livelihood, it represented her family's American dream. The weathered sign above the door, hand-painted by her grandfather, had become a town landmark. Port Harbor had always attracted tourists, but its economy remained balanced between fishing and visitor dollars. The town council, mostly composed of longtime residents, had historically prioritized preserving the town's character over rapid development. This balance began shifting 5 years ago when several council members retired and were replaced by newcomers with backgrounds in real estate and development. Around the same time, Oceanview Resorts International, a luxury hotel chain with properties across the Caribbean and Mediterranean, began purchasing properties in town through shell companies. By the time locals realized what was happening, Oceanview had acquired nearly 40% of the waterfront properties. Their plan was ambitious: a 300-room luxury resort with private beaches, a marina for yachts, and high-end retail spaces that would transform the sleepy fishing town into what their brochures called a premier luxury destination. The remaining waterfront property owners, mostly small businesses like Maria's, soon faced mounting pressure to sell. Property taxes mysteriously increased, building code violations were suddenly issued for conditions that had existed for decades, and anonymous complaints about businesses began flooding the town offices. When Maria received a letter offering 3 times her property's market value, she immediately recognized it as the opening move in a familiar game. Her neighboring shop owners received similar letters. Some were tempted by the money, especially the older owners who saw it as a chance to retire comfortably. "My grandfather didn't build this business so I could cash out when things got tough," Maria told her fellow shop owners at an impromptu meeting in the back of her store. "This harbor has been our home for generations. If we sell, where will our children work? Where will this community gather?" Despite Maria's encouragement, within 2 months, 5 neighboring businesses had sold. The historic bait shop now stood as an island amidst properties owned by Oceanview. Construction crews began work on either side, making it difficult for customers to reach her. Dust covered her inventory, and the constant noise drove away business. Then came the meeting that changed everything. The town council announced a special session to discuss waterfront rezoning for economic development. The agenda was purposefully vague, but Maria and other locals suspected its true purpose. The council chambers were packed that Tuesday evening. Oceanview executives presented sleek renderings of their proposed resort, a massive structure that would dwarf everything else in town. They promised jobs, increased tax revenue, and a new era of prosperity for Port Harbor. When public comments opened, Maria was first to the microphone. She hadn't planned to speak, but watching the executives in their expensive suits talking about revitalizing a community they'd never been part of ignited something in her. "My name is Maria Sanchez," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "My grandfather came to this country with nothing but hope and determination. He worked on fishing boats for 20 years, saving every penny until he could open our shop. That shop has supported 3 generations of my family and has been a gathering place for this community for 50 years. She pointed to the renderings on the wall. "These drawings are beautiful, but they aren't Port Harbor. They could be anywhere: Miami, Cancun, Dubai. What makes our town special is that it isn't like everywhere else. It's authentic, it's real, and once we lose that, we can never get it back." She then revealed something nobody knew. She'd been documenting the tactics used against the small business owners, the strategic building code violations, the property tax reassessments that targeted only businesses that refused to sell, the construction scheduled at peak business hours. "This isn't economic development," she concluded. "It's economic bullying, and it stops now." The room erupted in applause. Other business owners came forward with similar stories. What was meant to be a routine approval had turned into a public relations disaster for both Oceanview and the council members who supported them. The council chairman, visibly uncomfortable, tried to move forward with the vote. That's when Maria played her final card. "Before you vote," she said, "you should know that I've been in contact with the Coastal Protection Alliance. They've reviewed the development plans and have significant concerns about environmental impacts that haven't been properly addressed in the environmental impact study." This was a bluff. Maria hadn't actually contacted anyone yet, but she had noticed suspicious omissions in the environmental reports presented by Oceanview. The resort plans would require dredging parts of the harbor, which could disturb sediment potentially contaminated by a long-closed industrial plant upstream. The threat of environmental litigation was enough to force the council to table the vote. Maria had bought some time, but she knew Oceanview wouldn't give up easily. She needed to turn her bluff into reality. The next morning, Maria closed her shop early and drove 3 hours to the regional office of the Coastal Protection Alliance. She hadn't made an appointment and sat in the waiting room for 4 hours before a junior staff attorney finally agreed to see her. "I don't have an environmental law degree," Maria told the attorney, "but I know when something doesn't add up." She spread out copies of Oceanview's environmental impact studies she had requested through public records. "They claim there's no risk from dredging the harbor, but there was a chemical plant upstream that closed in the 1980s. I remember my grandfather talking about how they used to dump waste directly into the river." The attorney, initially skeptical, became increasingly interested as Maria walked through the inconsistencies she'd noticed. "The study mentions soil samples, but doesn't specify where they were taken. And look at these water quality measurements. They're from the center of the harbor, not near the shoreline where the development would occur." By the end of the meeting, the attorney promised to look into it further. 2 weeks later, the Coastal Protection Alliance formally requested a comprehensive environmental review of the harbor before any development could proceed. Oceanview executives were furious. They increased pressure on Maria, now the symbolic leader of the resistance. Strange cars parked outside her shop. She received anonymous calls in the middle of the night. The construction on either side of her shop intensified, with work now happening at night despite local noise ordinances. When Maria complained to the town council, she was told that special permits had been issued for the night work. The message was clear: the system was working against her. What Oceanview didn't understand was that their tactics only strengthened Maria's resolve. She began documenting everything, taking photos of construction violations, recording noise levels, collecting water samples from the harbor which she sent to independent labs for testing. Meanwhile, the Coastal Protection Alliance's investigation uncovered alarming results. Preliminary tests confirmed Maria's suspicions. The harbor sediment contained significant levels of industrial chemicals that would be released into the water if disturbed by dredging. The Alliance filed an emergency petition with the State Environmental Protection Agency and alerted the U.S. Coast Guard, which has jurisdiction over navigable waterways and potential hazardous material incidents. Oceanview's attorneys dismissed these findings as alarmist and lacking scientific merit. They pushed the town council to move forward with approval before the state agencies could intervene. A vote was scheduled for the following Monday. The weekend before the vote, Maria found her shop vandalized, windows broken, inventory damaged by water from purposefully clogged drains left running overnight. The message was again clear: give up. Instead of cleaning up immediately, Maria called the local newspaper and television station. They think they can intimidate us into silence, she told reporters standing amidst the damage. But this isn't just about my shop anymore. It's about whether we let wealthy outsiders destroy our community and our environment for profit. The images of the vandalized historic shop made regional news. By Sunday evening, hundreds of community members had gathered at the harbor in a spontaneous show of support. They helped clean up the shop and organized a community watch program to prevent further vandalism. Monday morning brought an unexpected development. As dawn broke over the harbor, residents noticed something unusual. Coast Guard vessels were entering the bay. Not just one, but 5 vessels. They anchored in a line across the harbor entrance. Word spread quickly through town. By 8 a.m., the harbor was crowded with residents trying to figure out what was happening. At 9 a.m., officers from the Coast Guard, accompanied by representatives from the State Environmental Protection Agency and the federal EPA, disembarked. The lead officer requested a meeting with town officials and representatives from Oceanview. The council meeting scheduled for that evening was hastily moved up, now with federal and state officials in attendance. The Coast Guard captain wasted no time with pleasantries. Based on environmental testing conducted over the weekend, we have reason to believe the harbor contains hazardous materials in the sediment that pose a significant public health and environmental risk if disturbed. Under federal law, we are establishing a protection zone and will be conducting a comprehensive environmental assessment. He placed a thick folder of documents on the table. This is a cease and desist order prohibiting any dredging, construction, or development activity in or adjacent to the harbor until our assessment is complete and remediation plans, if necessary, are approved. Oceanview's attorneys immediately protested, claiming overreach and threatening lawsuits. The Coast Guard captain remained unmoved. You're welcome to pursue legal action, but this order comes with the full authority of federal environmental protection statutes. Violating it carries significant civil and criminal penalties. The town council meeting that evening was moved to the high school gymnasium to accommodate the hundreds of residents who wanted to attend. The council chairman, looking defeated, announced that the rezoning vote would be postponed indefinitely pending the environmental investigation. When Maria entered the gymnasium, the crowd gave her a standing ovation. She hadn't sought to become the face of the resistance, but her refusal to be intimidated had inspired the community. The environmental assessment took 6 months to complete. The results confirmed what Maria had suspected. Decades of industrial pollution had left dangerous levels of chemicals in the harbor sediment. Disturbing it through dredging would release these toxins into the water, potentially causing significant environmental damage and health risks. The report's findings made state and then national news. Other coastal communities facing similar development pressures began investigating their own harbors. In several cases, they found comparable environmental concerns that had been overlooked or deliberately minimized in development plans. Oceanview Resorts International found itself facing not just a PR disaster, but potential legal liability for attempting to proceed with development, despite indications of environmental hazards. Their stock price took a significant hit as investors worried about similar issues at other locations. Rather than fight a prolonged legal battle they might lose, Oceanview made a strategic decision. They announced they were reimagining their Port Harbor project to better align with the community's values and environmental concerns. Their revised plan eliminated the marina and dredging, significantly reduced the resort's size, and included funds for environmental remediation of the harbor. Most significantly, they offered to protect the historic waterfront by incorporating existing structures into their design rather than demolishing them. Maria's shop would remain intact, with Oceanview offering her a lifetime lease at a nominal rate. They even proposed naming the boardwalk after her grandfather. It was a transparent attempt to salvage their investment and repair their damaged reputation. Maria was skeptical, but recognized that the community needed a resolution that addressed the environmental issues while allowing for some economic development. Working with the Coastal Protection Alliance, she negotiated additional concessions, guaranteed jobs for local residents, funding for a commercial fishing support center, and an environmental monitoring program that would continue for decades. The final agreement wasn't perfect, but it represented something rare, a compromise that acknowledged both economic realities and the importance of preserving community character and environmental health. 1 year after the Coast Guard vessels lined the harbor, construction finally began on a smaller, more environmentally sensitive resort that incorporated rather than replaced the town's historic waterfront. Maria's shop remained at its center, now protected as a historic landmark. The events in Port Harbor created ripples far beyond the small coastal town. The case established important legal precedents regarding environmental reviews for coastal development and highlighted the tactics often used to pressure small business owners. State legislators used Port Harbor as a case study when drafting new laws requiring more transparent environmental impact studies and protections for historic business districts. The Coastal Protection Alliance created a toolkit for other communities facing similar pressures, with Maria's documentation methods featured prominently. Oceanview, recognizing the changing landscape, revised its development approach nationwide. Their new projects emphasized working with communities rather than transforming them, preserving local character while still creating profitable properties. Their Port Harbor resort, once seen as a compromise forced upon them, became a model for their other developments, and ironically, one of their most successful properties. As for Maria, she became something of a folk hero among environmental activists and small business advocates. She still runs her shop, still sells bait and tackle to both locals and tourists, and still tells stories about her grandfather. But now, she also shares her experience with other community activists, teaching them how to recognize and combat predatory development tactics. On clear days, you can find her sitting on the dock outside her shop, watching fishing boats and resort guests coexist in the harbor. The Coast Guard vessels that once lined up in a show of federal authority have long since departed, but their impact remains in the cleaner water, the preserved waterfront, and in the knowledge that sometimes, against all odds, a single person standing their ground can change everything. The story of Port Harbor reminds us that economic development doesn't have to come at the expense of community character or environmental health. It shows that when citizens are vigilant and willing to stand up for their communities, they can reshape the future of their towns. It also highlights the critical importance of environmental protections and the need for transparency in development projects. The hidden environmental hazards in Port Harbor's harbor could have caused irreparable damage if not for one shop owner's persistence. Most importantly, it demonstrates that compromise isn't always a failure. The final resolution in Port Harbor wasn't a total victory for either side. The developers got their resort, though smaller than planned, and the community preserved its character while gaining environmental remediation and economic opportunities. What happened in Port Harbor is happening in coastal communities across the country right now. Development pressures continue to mount as waterfront property becomes increasingly valuable. But thanks to Maria Sanchez and her stand against Oceanview, communities now have a roadmap for protecting their interests. Next time you visit a coastal town with a charming historic waterfront, remember that its existence might be the result of battles fought by people like Maria, ordinary citizens who refused to be bullied and in doing so, changed the rules of the game. If you found this story inspiring, check out our next video about how a small mountain town successfully prevented a massive ski resort development through innovative land trust arrangements. The tactics they used could help save your community too.